Common sense right here. What is up, everyone? Whew. Today we're going to be breaking down one of the biggest political battles of the year 2025, the government shutdown. It was the longest shutdown in U.S. history, lasting over 40 days, and it left millions of Americans wondering, why did this happen? Who's to blame? First of all, I want to talk about how insanely funny it is that from the beginning we were told that this was the Republican shutdown. It was the Republicans' fault that we're shut down. They control everything. It's the Republicans' fault. Yet as soon as we got word that the shutdown was finally going to come to an end. Sorry about that. You'll just have to mind the cat. When we finally got word that the shutdown was finally going to end, all the Republicans and all the left finally came out and spoke with their chest, talking about how the Republicans, or not Republicans, the Democrats, talking about how the Democrat Party, finally caved. They bent a knee to the Republicans, meaning it was not the Republicans' fault. It was actually the Democrats' fault, like the Republicans have been telling you all along. As Republicans were saying from the start, it was of course Democrats' fault why the shutdown lasted as long as it did, because every time they went to vote, they kept voting against letting the bill pass every single time. So of course the shutdown began on October the 1st of 2025, the start of the new fiscal year, the moment when Congress has to pass funding bills to keep the government open. The two parties couldn't agree on the terms of a temporary spending bill known as the Continuing Resolution, or CR for short. Republicans in the House, led by Speaker Mike Johnson and supported by President Donald Trump, they wanted a clean CR, clean resolution, a simple bill to keep the government funded while negotiations continued. Democrats, however, refused to back that unless the deal included an extension of the Affordable Care Act subsidies. And then, of course, the standoff began. The Democrats wanted ACA subsidies, or they weren't going to pass the bill. Republicans, of course, said, "Shut up. Let's just get this over with. Let's just pass the bill. Come on now, you guys are being ridiculous." And then, of course, as we know, this was the longest recorded shutdown in the history. So, um, it lasted a whole 40 days. The Democrats used the shutdown as leverage. They used it as a way to pressure Republicans and the White House to pass their health care priorities to get their way. They were whining the entire time about it. But of course, the Republicans giving in would have meant accepting major new spending and entitlements without debate. And of course, the result of the government shutdown, hundreds of thousands of federal workers were furloughed or working without pay. Services like SNAP, airport operations, and national parks all suffered greatly because of this. Public frustrations grew day by day. But inside Washington, both parties were betting that the other would take the political blame. Of course, we saw this. We saw this everywhere. We saw it on social media, we saw it on news outlets. We saw it everywhere. Playing the blame game essentially. When all along, as we know, it was the Democrats. It was the Democrats. It's always usually the Democrats' fault. The Republicans did support a funding bill to reopen government early on, but Democrats blocked it in the Senate because it didn't include the ACA subsidy extensions. Republicans wanted to reopen the government without extra spending or policy add-ons. Democrats wanted to keep the government closed until they got new spending commitments for healthcare. Even outlets like Vox and Politico, not exactly conservative Republicans, reported that Democrats were using the shutdown to force action on healthcare. So if you're asking who kept the shutdown going, the evidence points mainly to Democrats. Of course, Democrats' biggest demand was the ACA, but they also wanted to restore about $5 billion in foreign aid funding. They wanted more money for social programs like SNAP, and they want guarantees for federal workers, back pay, and protection from layoffs. Republicans agreed to the back pay and worker protections, but not to the healthcare expansions or new spending. That's why Democrats kept blocking bills to reopen the government until they couldn't anymore. And then, of course, we got the resolution. It finally ended. After 40 plus days of pressure, public frustration, and internal division, the Senate finally voted on a bipartisan continuing resolution around November 10th, 11th of 2025. The deal funded the government through January 30, 2026, restored worker pay, and included a few modest funding measures, but it did not include the ACA subsidy extension Democrats demanded. And here's the key part. 8 Democrats broke with their party and joined Republicans to end the shutdown. They, of course, were John Fetterman, Catherine Cortez, Angus King, Dick Durbin, Maggie Hassan, Tim Kaine, Jackie Rosen, and Jean Shaheen. Hope I pronounced those right. They essentially said enough is enough. We need to reopen the government. They gave the Republicans the 60 votes needed to pass the bill through the Senate. The House then approved it, and President Trump signed it into law shortly after. Now, the continuing resolution only lasts until January 2026, so this means that we could see the same standoff again soon, unless Congress can finally agree on long-term budget bills. So let's hope that does not happen. And that's basically the gist of it. You were lied to this whole time to believe that it was Republicans' fault. It was Republicans' fault. We wanted a clean resolution, a very fast, simple resolution. Democrats would not allow it. Democrats kept voting against it unless they got their way. They used it as leverage. They quite literally used it as leverage. And because we have control and Trump is the president, Republicans are in office, they use that as leverage, and they used it to convince every single person of why it's the Republicans' fault. They control everything. They have the government shut down, when that just wasn't the case. And I'm pretty sure they used it as leverage, and that's how they were able to have a pretty clean sweep when we had the vote for all the governors that we did. The 4th, November the 4th, I believe it was, when they voted in for Virginia, New York, and I want to say New Jersey. I could be wrong about that third one. I think they might have used that as part of their plan, or if they weren't smart enough to see that far ahead, maybe they then used it as their plan when they realized, hey, we could use this as a leverage, And they did, and they clean sweeped, and it could have been because so many people were mad at Republicans that they wanted to, in spite them, vote in Democrats for government leadership. That is one for the books, the longest shutdown in recorded American history. What do you guys think? Let me know what your thoughts and opinions are below about the shutdown. Guys, with that said, hope you all enjoyed the video. God bless you all. God bless America. Hope to see you on the next one. Jesus Christ is King. Goodbye, everyone. God bless you all.